Okay, starting with termites, I want to go over a few species. Now, in the arid mountain west, you're mostly just going to have subterranean termites. And what that means is they're going to live in the soil and they come into the house for dinner. And dinner is wet wood, or it's wet something that used to be wood. That could be paper. It could be the paper on the backside of the sheetrock. It could actually be the paper between the gypsum on the sheetrock and the paint. They will actually eat that paper. You know, one story that I have as relates to subterranean termites is that I had a buddy who he has since moved to Washington. When he was here, he was living in an area where the homes, I'm going to say they were built about 1960. They had very mature landscaping. And in his backyard, he had this tree that was, I'm going to say it was about 60 feet tall, and it had a trunk that was about 6 feet in diameter. It's, you know, one of those big, old, massive trees. And so as a result, he had lots of leaves, and he had this basement back door that he never opened or well, it was always closed. So he had this basement back door with a wood door frame around it. And what happened is all the leaves from this tree, they basically piled up against the house. And then you had sprinkler systems and rain and stuff that was keeping all this leafy debris wet. Now to a termite, you know, they're looking for wet wood, but leaves are wood. And as I mentioned, wood door frames are wood, and paper is wood, and cardboard is wood. So this is exactly what the termite queen was looking for. She landed in this area. She stopped and she had as much dinner as she wanted to from these wet leaves, and then she went into the door frame, got into the house, and created this massive termite colony. So my buddy calls me up and he says, you know, I think I have termites, come take a look. So I did, and I showed up, and sure enough, there was this active colony. I found a termite worker, which he looks like pretty much about the size and shape of a grain of rice with a head and legs and those sorts of things. And so I put him inside this 110 film canister. Those of you who are nearly as old as me will remember those film canisters. And I took that thing home. It was about a 20-minute ride. By the time I get home, I checked that, and that termite worker was both dead and 1/3 of his size. He had dried out to death. That is an example of how much they need the moisture. So that's why they live in the soil, is they've got the moisture they need in the soil, and then they come into the house for dinner. In his case, he had a leaking shower wall that was dinner, and then they would go back out into the soil. They really need the moisture. And so as a result, they're going to build what's called mud tubes, which will help preserve the humidity between point A in the soil and point B in the house, wherever the wet wood is. So that's one of the signs that you've got termites, especially subterranean ones. I have also seen mud tubes on the exterior of the walls. Sometimes you'll see that in a corner inside where you've got a mud tube going up between maybe the stud and the sheetrock. They're in the corners where you've got water running down and they're going up. Sometimes you'll see that. I've seen that, for example, on chimney flues or on chimneys in the basement where they've got maybe the one I'm thinking of had lava rock. And so you would see this winding mud tube that would go wind up this lava rock up to where dinner was. So that's, that's a sign. If you see mud tubes, it's not proof that you have an active termite colony, but it's proof that you may have a termite colony, and you definitely have a termite history, and unless it's been identified and fixed, you have a reason why the termites are there. And that may be a leaking roof, it may be a leaking sink, but whatever the source of the water is, that needs to be identified and eliminated. If it is not, then chances are you've got an active termite colony. So besides the subterranean termites, you've got the damp wood and the dry wood. Damp wood termites are mostly just in the south. You've got them in South Florida, you got them Arizona, you got them West Coast, Hawaii. Those are generally not a problem inside the house because they're actually working on the dead tree that is actually outside. So they take third place as far as potential home damage is concerned. Then you've got the dry wood termites. Now these are the ones that actually don't have to live in the soil. They can actually live in the house. And the difference then is they have to be treated differently. If your home has a dry wood termite, you've got to tent the house. And then you poison basically the termites that are in the house at that moment, and you kill those. You remove the tent, and then at the next day, the termites start over it, building the colony and eating your house. Now the drywood termites can actually live, for example, in hardwood. So you might be walking across a living room floor, and as you're doing that, you're stepping across a termite tunnel, if it's drywood termites. If that hardwood is dry and it's not continually wetted over time, then you're not going to have the subterranean termites in there. It's just too dry, they can't eat it. Again, they're looking for wet wood, and if you can either eliminate the wet or the wood, but it's a lot easier to eliminate the water. So for subterraneans, that's what you're dealing with. I actually did an inspection on a home that became a Thai restaurant, and they knew that there was termites in the basement because we had water that was flowing towards the foundation. It was getting through the foundation, and that water was getting the studs wet, and the termites had been chewing on that for years. What they were willing to accept that. What they wanted to know is if there was termites in the joists, and it turns out that there was not, because those joists had remained dry. So there was no damage structurally to those joists, where there had been considerable damage to the studs there in the basement on the exterior walls. Okay, so that's the species and a little bit how to identify different types of termites. Again, I don't want to say maybe 90%, depending on what state you live in. There may be some dampwood or drywood termites, but the vast majority of the structural damage is going to be associated with subterraneans. I guess something I should mention is that while you tent for drywood termites, you don't do that for subterraneans. Given that they actually live in the soil and move into the house for dinner, what a remediator is going to do is he's going to drill around the perimeter of the home, insert poison, and basically create a poison curtain, so that as they pass through that curtain, they die. And that is obviously a very different method of treating termites than tenting and poisoning. It depends, again, on where you live and what sort of termites we got for how we deal with those. I think that's important to you to know as a realtor and as you're guiding your clients. For example, say you do live in Utah or Idaho or Colorado or Nebraska, and you've got clients that are coming in from Texas or South Florida or Hawaii. They're going to be concerned about termites, and they might want to tent, and that would not be the right solution. You may or may not choose to actually give them this information that I'm handing you, but you would know enough to suggest at least that they talk to a local expert on how best to deal with termites in that house. And we're going to talk about that, how in many cases we do well-meaning but very ineffective solutions because we don't know enough as homeowners. Next section, we're going to talk about the termite point of view so that you can understand what they need, and then you can eliminate that. We'll be right back.